Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master and welcome to another one of my story analysis. I wasn't originally going to do this for this game, but as I wrote my script I realized I wrote over 5 pages talking about this game's plot. Time to make another video instead. Besides, I can give you a plot spoiler warning right now and maybe fit in a few jokes doing it this way that I wouldn't have done in my regular review. So beware, if you clicked on this video, I am going to be talking about the entire game story and its plot. So plot spoiler warning is in effect from now on. Anyways, the story of Castlevania Lords of Shadow begins in the 11th century and follows Gabriel Belmont, a member of the Brotherhood of Light, holy warriors that fight demons and other evil creatures in the name of God. Gabriel's wife was murdered a few days ago, and around the same time heaven got cut off from earth, meaning that anyone who dies, souls get stuck as a wandering spirit. Gabriel is looking for a way to talk to his deceased wife about a way to stop all this, and after encountering the old god Pan and a mysterious warrior named Zobek, Gabriel finally gets to have a conversation with his wife. He finds out in order to unite Earth and Heaven again, he has to destroy the Lords of Shadow and attain the God Mask they share. One Lord is in an ancient city hidden in the forest, another in a castle filled with vampires, and the other rules the land of the dead as Death the Necromancer. If they can do that, Gabriel can stop the chaos going on in the world and even use the mask they have to revive his dead wife. Along the way he encounters other characters who help him, but they all seem to meet untimely ends just because they became associated with them. Okay, I'll start talking about the good parts of this game's story. The game is very narrative focused, which is very much different than the old Castlevania games, which plots were simple. Even Igarashi made Castlevania games had simple stories. Sure, a few plot twists happens and more narrative than the NES games, but it all boiled down either to, by accident or by bloodline, the character you played as is destined to find Dracula and strike him down and keep him from coming back. Here the narrative is really thick and the character development and ideas are really out there. Each stage has an introduction to and is narrated by Sir Patrick Stewarts, who's most famous for being the former voiceover guy for National Rent-A-Car. He also played Captain Somebody or Another on some Star Journey show in the 80s and played some sort of professor in the X something or another movies. Here he plays Zobek, who does the narration, and while we learn more about Zobek from the narration than we actually see him partake in the story, Stewart's delivery of the story introduction explains what's going on when Gabriel hits these areas, add a lot more deep narrative to the story, more than any cutscene could have, and I just like the approach.
It is said this relic can bring back the dead. It is said this relic can bestow...
Gabriel himself, although not having near as much dialogue as Zobek in his narration, is an interesting enough person. He basically has to deal with the fact that life is crapping on him everywhere at the moment. His wife is dead, he's pissed about it, and everyone he meets basically ends up dying in some tragic way or ends up betraying him one way or another. But he keeps going and he keeps his hopes up, and by the end of the journey, although he's not my favorite character in a video game, he's compelling and well written enough to root for. And although there is a reboot, they do leave a little nods to the classic series. A character named Rinaldo Gandolfi carved Gabriel's whip called the Combat Cross before disappearing into some woods to chase after a vampire that managed to turn his daughter. Makes you wonder if he didn't run into Leon Belmont shortly after. The vampire's castle was also built by the Bernhard family, and a bunch of other nods to Lament of Innocence are found within this game. So what's bad about this game story? Well, before I get into the plot spoiler territory, just let me tell you what in the classic Castlevania storyline maintains. Again, you're a guy who may or may not have a whip, who's in Dracula's castle to kill the evil count and get out. You can change the year, you can change some of the side characters, but for the story, for the most part, is always the same. Because of that, they can jump around in the timeline and not have it get too confusing. Here, being anchored down by a weighty plot and characters mean you don't have that leeway. You actually have to keep the story in between established plot lines that you have already created. Meaning, as a standalone game, this story is pretty good, but trying to establish another Castlevania side series that was long-lasting and enduring as the original series, it isn't going to happen, especially with this game's ending. Alright, let's get into the plot spoilers then. When Gabriel first encounters his first Lord of Shadow, Cornell, he tells him what the 3 Lords of Shadow actually are. You see, the Brotherhood of Light that Gabriel fights for has 3 founding members. It seems they got carried away in trying to find more power in order to purify everything and themselves of all their sins, and because they were spending so much time trying to find more power to get rid of evil, they managed to transcend themselves and sent their spirits to heaven to serve God. Unfortunately, only their good halves got to take the trip. Seems all the evil with them got to stay on Earth, trapped in their bodies, turning them all into monsters. So what problems do I have with this? Well, as basic plot, none really. The fact that Gabriel has to fight the same people who founded the organization that raised and trained him has some compelling moments. But the problem is this is supposed to lead up to a big twist that is done as poorly as the fact that we find out that Kratos is Lloyd's father and Tales of Symphonia. Yeah, you see Zobek there, his whole character bio gives away too much. It says he's an older member from the Brotherhood of Light, and he has the armor of a founding member, which we just found out is both immortal and a monster. Why the hell would he give a family member who would turn around and be duty-bound to kill him, give him that armor? It makes no sense. Also, why is he following Gabriel around and not helping him? When this was dropped, and it's done about 1/3 of the way through the storyline, I knew Zobek was actually going to be death. The shame of it is if they took out that profile twist and rewrote it, not to include too much information, they actually have all the recipes for a perfect twist. A good twist can't just come out of nowhere. There has to be a tell that the guy isn't entirely on the up and up, but not one too big that people figure it out too far ahead of time, and the pieces still have to mesh up in the right way for it to be satisfying. And here, outside of the profile they do, it's just fine. What is Zobek's fascination with Gabriel? The times we think he's talking about death traveling by Gabriel's side to kill all these wrongdoers, we think of the physical kind of the punishment Gabriel's about to give out on all these monsters. Instead, he's talking about himself. All these pieces mesh up perfectly, but that damn bio spoiled it for me. Anyways, when we do find out that Zobek is death at the end, he starts to slowly kill Gabriel, and while he's doing it, he spills his guts about everything.
Was someone to restore the luminous power of the spirits according to the prophecy, and you have been the perfect dupe.
It seems that he managed to put Gabriel under his influence and had him murder his own wife, and he was also responsible for killing some of the people Gabriel has come in contact and pinned the whole thing on him. His whole plan was to get rid of the other members in the Lords of Shadow so he can have the God's Mask's power all to himself. So what's he going to do with the mask? Well, you guessed it. He's going to take over the world. But before he can do that, Satan pops out of nowhere and basically burns Zobek to a crisp because it was his plan all along and he was just manipulating Zobek. Okay, this character here, not really needed. Why not just fight Zobek? He's the evil villain all along and we don't get to fight him at all. And hey, let's not forget, it's a Castlevania game. Where the hell is Dracula? He's supposed to be the villain in a Castlevania game. Anyway, Gabriel fights and manages to defeat Satan, saying that he believes God will forgive him for all the crimes he has committed and that there will be a way to repent and redeem himself in the end. After that, he finds out the God's Mask can't revive people, but the good news is that the barrier between heaven and earth has been lifted, so Gabriel Weiss manages to cross over into the hereafter, leaving Gabriel alone and broken man with his faith of humanity in the order he belongs to now completely lost, and also now coming to the grips he's all alone in the world. And if it ended here, I would say, okay, not a bad game, but why are you calling it Castlevania? There is no encounter or even mentioning of the famous vampire Dracula. And then the after credits scene comes up and we finally get to see the famous vampire. And the story digs itself into another even deeper hole. The after credits scene, we find out that Zobek is still very much alive and heads into a church and heads into the ruined castle that lies just above the cathedral. His mission here is to ask for Gabriel's help because he's afraid Satan is about to return, and when he does, he's going to kick both of their asses. Gabriel gets angry at the sound of his own name, saying that his true name is Dracul. We see a white-haired vampire, thunder flashes to let us know that it is indeed Gabriel turned into a vampire and really letting himself go. Okay, so this is where it ended. Still kind of cool. Different, but cool. The Belmont family is fighting their founder too. Dracula and death relationship isn't one of friendship, but one of necessity to protect themselves from a greater evil. Unfortunately, the writers take it too far and dig the hole basically clear to China. The two get into a fight because, let's face it, Gabriel has every right to hate Zobek by this point. And this time, Zobek manages to knock his scrawny butt out the window, and we find out we're in a futuristic city. Great, we went from Lament of Innocence on the timeline to Aria of Sorrow in just one game, from the beginning to the end of the timeline. Heck with, maybe exploring other Belmont's adventures in a different game, like Trevor, Simon, and Richter. They're not going to be explored here, at least not in any satisfying way since we've already jumped all the way over them. We do get to see Trevor, Simon, and Alucard and the Mirror of Fate, but that story seems so forced, and what they did to the characters, especially Alucard, just doesn't sit well with me, just because it has nothing to do with the Alucard in the original series. You shorten the reboot series to be a very short-lived one, to a long-lasting series that needed a proper reboot of equal length and importance, and that's not the worst thing of it all. And unlike the original Castlevania series that took liberties with Bram Stoker's material, but made sure to include it was there from time to time, this one throws the original book completely out the window. The only thing I can say that they did right by the original lore is changing the nature of Gabriel's whip. In the original series, they had to make a game explaining how the Belmont clan's magical whip can destroy vampires, because usually killing vampires requires pointy objects. Basically, it's made out of magic, alchemy, and the souls of Leon's Belmont's girlfriend. Here, Gabriel's chain is barbed so it can cut into its opponents. Cut a vampire enough and yeah, I guess it can be counted as being run through, though I guess. Also, Gabriel has a knife at the end of it so he can stab them through the chest, which does make it a completely legitimate vampire destroying tool, and a little better than just say a magical whip of alchemy. Anyways, when I played through the original version without the DLC on the PS3, I thought they dug themselves a deep hole, but they did manage to hit rock bottom. Surely some good writing can get them out of it, or so I thought. Then I tried the DLC attached to the Ultimate version that is sold on Steam, and oh boy. Yeah, if you wanted to know how Gabriel went from good but broken man to Lord of Darkness, it happens here because it's his fate. Yeah, he was always destined to turn evil. Anyways, he gets a call from a vampire called Laura, and her managed to strike up an odd sort of friendship back when he was touring the vampire castle early in the game. He beat her, and she didn't kill him for it. Anyway, since Gabriel killed the Lords of Shadow, the castle she lives in is no longer safe for her. She is scared that a demon called the Forgotten One will return because the whole Lords of Shadow had put a seal on it. Since they have been defeated, the seal is now weakened. Gabriel searches new areas of the castle and finally finds a portal to the sealed world the demon is in. But before he can enter, he finds out that humans can't enter the sealed world. In order to do battle with this demon, he has to receive the vampire's gift, and Laura asks him to drain her dry. something he manages to do and enters the world no longer being human, but being a savage warrior. He manages to defeat the Forgotten One and absorbs its powers, thus transforming into Dracula. Yeah, what can I say goes wrong here other than everything? Okay, Dracula can be a somewhat sympathetic villain, but he still has to be a villain. One of the flaws of Lament of Innocence is we don't see Leon's friend Matthias until the very end when he completes the ritual and is becoming the vampire that will one day be known as Dracula. But we know enough to understand his motives for doing that, and ripping off Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula movie, he's angry that his wife died and he wants to get revenge on God for taking her by becoming immortal. He's somewhat sympathetic, but still a villain because he did to Leon the exact same thing he is accusing God of, and Leon's response to him is, "Me and my family will hunt you down wherever you may appear." Here, Gabriel didn't want to become a vampire. The only reason he accepts the gift is because he has to use it to save the world. He's way too sympathetic. He has the right to be angry with the world, but again, not the type to really see it destroyed. That's already been established. He didn't turn evil because he wanted to become evil or was selfish, but it was his fate to become evil. Meaning any game where he is the direct villain, he's going to fall flat on his freaking face without some more character development for the villain. And yeah, Mirror of Fate's storyline was all over the place. I have yet to play Lords of Shadow 2 yet, but I haven't heard many good things about it. Overall, the story has a lot of good points, but God, does the ending just let you know from the get-go, if they were expecting this new Castlevania series to be as endearing as the last, you came to the wrong place. To be a good Dracula, the decision to give up one's humanity to become a monster has to be made willingly and not forced. It just doesn't make him a good villain. A good anti-hero maybe, but not a good villain. Again, I can't wait to get into Lord of Darkness 2, but again, I'm not having much high hopes, especially on the narrative. I'll see you guys later. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below.